in jail for, you know, maybe overnight just to fuck with them, but like for like 3 years, like, are you kidding me? That would ruin a person's life. It really will. If you're in jail for that long, that will ruin your life. You might think, well, it's not the end of your life, and it's like, it kind of is. If you're thrown in jail for 3 years for, you know, for anything like that, you know, if you got kids and shit, they're gonna grow up without you, and you know, they're gonna grow up in somebody else's care. You'll lose your job, most of your property, because you can't afford to store it, unless you have cool family that'll store it for you. You know, you're gonna lose everything. And then you get out, and you got a record, and you gotta fucking go through all the rigmarole of having a record, because at least in America, I don't know, I mean, Europe seems like they're a lot more liberal on how they treat their prisoners, but in America, it's like you're never done paying. It's like you get caught doing something or whatever, and you go to jail, and you do the time, the actual time, right? And then you get out, and you're on probation, and that's like basically, probation is just basically saying, when you fuck up again, we're gonna hit you extra hard. And because the likelihood of you having some kind of police interaction when you're a felon, an ex-felon, is pretty high, especially in America, since it's like impossible to get a job, and we really treat our ex-felons like shit. And don't get me wrong, it's like you did the time, whatever, you know, the crime, do the time, whatever, but at the same time, I'm like, if you did the time, then that should be it, you know? Shouldn't follow you around. I mean, there's a couple crimes that I believe should follow you around forever, and that's, you know, P3DOs, you know, rapists, those kind of people, yeah. People on the list, on the offender list, yeah, it should follow you around. But, you know, if you, like, involuntarily killed somebody driving because they walked in front of you or some bullshit, that shouldn't follow you around forever when you're trying to get a job and start a family and all that, you know? And at least in Europe and a lot of places, it used to be that they had a lot more liberal of a judicial system, but I don't think that applies so much anymore. I think they're a lot harsher now, especially on the native population of the Europe. Anybody that speaks up against certain agendas and certain policies seems like they get stepped on pretty hard. So it's my opinion from a silly, stupid, uncultured American. But it seems like Europe, you know, you see pictures of Europe in certain spots, it doesn't even look like Europe anymore. It looks like Bangladesh or like Libya. And it's like, yeah, diversity is great and all that shit, don't get me wrong. But everybody in the world deserves a homeland, right? Everybody deserves a homeland. And pretty much everybody's got one. Seems like Europeans aren't allowed to have one, though. No, I'm not bitching because I'm an American. We've always been mutts over here. Yeah, the country was colonized by white people. But even back then, there's always other people in the mix. Even back in colonial days, there was Asians, blacks, obviously, Native Americans, Hispanics. You know, America's always been a melting pot. So I can't really speak. But Europe hasn't been. Europe's been a white continent. It's been the white continent. And it's like, you could say, well, they have it coming because of colonization and all this shit. And it's like, well, okay. You know, colonization was bad in some ways. But the people that did it are dead. The people they did it to are dead. None of us did anything to anybody else. So I think that's a cheap argument, personally. I think people use it because it's against white people. And, yeah. So, I don't know. I think, and Europe is cracking down on anybody. Like, if I was talking like I am right now over there on Twitter or something, I would definitely at least get a talking to. You know, at the very least. Some people get a lot worse. No, I don't care. Like I said, diversity is great and all that shit, but it needs to be balanced. Balance is everything. Everything needs to be balanced in life. If you don't have balance, you're screwed, you know? You really are. Gotta have it. Wrong color. Oh, yeah, here. Yeah, you gotta have balance, and there's a lot. They're bringing in a lot of people that aren't from there, that are just, they don't mix well, you know? it's not because they're black. It's just because they just don't mix well with the native population. You know, there's a lot of disparity when it comes to how women are treated in those cultures. So, I mean, there's been a lot of social strife going on in Europe and the UK for the last few years. And as an outsider looking in, it's crazy to watch, you know? It's crazy to watch your government treat you guys the way they treat you. You know? In my opinion, they've really kind of given you a, you know, they really kind of screwed you guys in a lot of ways. And it's kind of effed up, you know? Because it's like, you know, when you think of Europe, at least me, when I thought of Europe, I thought of like a hyper-liberal state, but not in a bad way. Like in a way of like, kind of like the Federation on Star Trek. You know? One that'll stick up for you no matter who you are and stuff. But they've like taken that to the nth degree. And, you know, are basically societally apologizing for shit that they never did by bringing in all these third world people for GDP goals. But it's like they're never going to have the GDP gains that they want because these people can't work, and nor they don't even want to work because they get such generous welfare packages because Europe has such a huge welfare state. But it's like at the same time the world's changing in such a way because Europe's going to be losing this capability to be a welfare state, because the only reason it was, or at least the big reason of why it was able to do that, was because for the last 80 years, the United States has been parked at Europe, defending it from its own actions, really, if you ask me. And they could afford to have a really generous welfare state because they didn't have to have a military, and they didn't have to, or at least they didn't have to have a big one sufficient enough to police its own borders and, you know, deal with threats like the horrible Soviets, you know, which is the whole reason for NATO in the first place. So it's like, because of that, they were able to have these huge welfare states. And at the same time, they would talk shit about America, call us all a bunch of assholes, even though our military was the only reason they could do that, or one of the big reasons at least. Don't get me wrong, that's just the way it had to be for a long time. You know, after World War II, Europe was gutted. They had to get our help. The Marshall Plan was necessary. But, you know, it's going on 100 years at this point. So, now we want to leave and focus more on our backyard. And they want to bitch and call us a bunch of assholes. But either way, we're going to leave, and it's going to make it hard for them to continue to be a welfare state, is all I'm saying. And build up the military against the dreaded Russia. And it's like, who are they going to have to fight that? Who's going to fight for them? The horrible right-wing people they're always talking shit about? The right-wing thugs and Nazis? I don't think so. So it's like, who's going to join this military? The migrants? They're not going to join. They're going to go home if you try to make them join. They're going to fucking bounce. Because they're only there because they're getting such awesome welfare. So it's like, who's going to join this thing, you know? It's crazy. That's my opinion, at least. I'm not a freaking world, you know, I'm just a guy that pays attention and sees it through a certain lens, you know? And it's like the whole bygones be bygones era is over. Now it's like Europe's gone mad. It's like Russia and Ukraine, that whole thing is none of our fucking business. It wasn't from the get-go. Ukraine was never part of NATO. We never had an obligation to help them. And we definitely haven't had an obligation to help them this far. And there's definitely been enough allegations of fraud and shit that it warrants looking at least, from a rational mind. And that's not being a Putin apologist or anything. That's just being a rational person. Being pretty non-biased, actually. I just don't think it's any of our business. You know, it really isn't. You know, maybe selling them weapons, sure, but like giving them all this cash and being this entrenched with him. And then all the allegations of fraud with his people. All the stories of them abducting people on the side of the road and stuff like that. to, you know, bring in. It's crazy. So these dots kind of look cool when alcohol does its thing. So yeah, I don't know. It'd be nice if everybody would just get along, like Rodney King said, you know. But it won't happen. In the meantime, you're gonna go to jail in Europe if somebody is offended by a freaking post you make. Or if, you know, the government's pissed off about something you said. So, be careful. At least in America, for the time being, it's not like that. But, who knows? Maybe 10 years from now, some horrible leftist cult will be running America, or some, like, ultra-conservative religious cult will have taken over, and they'll go back and retroactively punish people, you know, for their Facebook posts and shit. You never know. That's what they do in the UK. You know, they even got rid of, or they either got rid of or trying to get rid of 2-week trials in the UK. Can you fucking believe that? They're trying to get rid of your ability to get a jury trial for anything up to 3 years. And 3 years, believe it or not, is about the time, the usual amount of time that you get for your naughty Facebook posts is 2 to 3 years. And they want to get rid of your ability to take that to trial if you wanted to. If they're like, you're getting 3 years because you said the F word on Twitter, and you're like, oh, I'm taking this to the Supreme Court, you know, and they're like, nope, you can't. Fuck you. You're just going to jail. And it's like, wow, they're actually releasing actual criminals so they can make room for people that talk shit about the government. Now, if that's not a dictator, I don't know what is. Donald Trump doesn't even do that. Donald Trump's the worst dictator in the world because, like, you know, if he was a real dictator, he wouldn't let all these people protest about him all the time and talk shit. He'd go arrest them all and put them in the gulag. You know, that's what I would do if I was a dictator. I wouldn't let all these people have all these fucking, you know, no king's days and all this kind of shit. You know, I would just, I would go and arrest them and put them in the gulag. Put them in the tower. That's what I would do. Anyway, it's like, whatever. AI is going to be running the world pretty soon anyway. Probably do a better job than the fucking people would, you know? People suck. No offense if you're a person. Not saying you suck, I'm just saying that people kind of suck. And they do, you know? The shit that people do. Alright, we got our little elves in the background, and that worked out. I was a little worried when those markers, because I was committed by, like, over here. All my markers are dying. Sorry, people. I guess I just haven't used them enough lately. I've been doing mainly black and white stuff. So I just haven't focused on it. Okay, what am I going to do here? I think for the rest of it, we want, like... What color we got here? Is this one worth the shit? Yeah, we'll use this guy. Yay. Alright, the portal openeth. Alright. Yeah, that AI stuff is getting better and better every day. You know, it's just like nothing's gonna be worth a shit anymore. You know, it's like having me on camera doesn't mean nothing anymore. I can just say it's AI. A good lawyer will argue that everything is AI. You know, we got him on camera, we got him dead to rights. Oh, that's AI, fuck you. You watch. They will. They're gonna do it. Everything will be, turned over in court. They'll be like, nope, nope. So it's like, will an eyewitness be more credible again? Because there was a time when the eyewitness was like as good as gold. Oh, I got an eyewitness, and it's like, all right, and it all based on your credibility. If you didn't go to church enough, or they saw you at the bar too often, like, you weren't a good eyewitness. They do that all the time. They're like, aren't you at the bar quite a bit? Like, oh, yeah? Yeah, eyewitness, this person is beyond reproach. So, as long as you were a upstanding member of the society, you were a good eyewitness, But if you weren't, if you were some vagabond or some shit, then nobody cared about your opinion or your eyewitnessness. So maybe with all this AI deepfake shit popping up, maybe being an eyewitness will be a thing again. I think that'll be interesting to find out. That's what I predict for the future. Maybe a witness to something will matter again more than a fucking video camera. Simply because it can be refuted. People will say, oh, no, no. So will people just get rid of video cameras then? Will video surveillance just go away? I wonder where that's going to go. Because if it's all going to be inadmissible now pretty soon, then what's it matter, It won't matter. We'll see. The AI judge that's judging you will make the decision ultimately. Yeah, you can see these markers are fun to deal with. They can do interesting stuff. I could do a lot more, but apparently all my markers are dried out. So I'll probably finish this illustration and call it good and get some new markers. It's okay though, it's time. Time to get some new ones. I have to before my graphic novel, because these aren't going to do. These ones are busted, as the kids say. As